right. So today's September 9th, and September 9th is, we talk a lot about the Lionsgate portal. There's a lot of different cultures that find those dates significant. But for numerologists and some astrologers, the alignment of certain numbers is highly significant across many different disciplines. So 999 being the last final number of the primaries is perfect for Pluto because Pluto's about death and transformation. So I'm going to go ahead and just jump right in. I'm sharing my screen and we're going to talk about Pluto. Pluto being, let me get my everything together here. Pluto being the planet, the ruler of Scorpio, the planet that governs transformation, rebirth, monumental metamorphosis is one of the reasons why everybody thinks it's so scary. So scary is interesting though. Scary means transformation, and I think we all sense that we're living in times of transformation. It got this intensity. It's because it's kind of very scorpionic. It's beneath the surface. So anything beneath the surface in the 3D world, oil, diamonds, and gold. I also think of it as a really good harbinger for the elemental kingdom, who descended beneath the surface when humanity got lost. Also, of course, it's a ruler of secrets and things unknown. But Pluto speaks to power, and this is great because we have Pluto in Capricorn right now for one of the last little bits. But Pluto isn't afraid to question who's in charge, and Pluto, kind of like Eris, is kind of not afraid to navigate the complex systems and the networks that are in power, quietly dismantling them. So there was an astrologer that I studied with at one point, and she used to say there's nothing Pluto loves more than demolition. I think that's interesting. I think that sort of speaks to the darker side of Pluto. I offer death for the purpose of rebirth. So we're going through this period of death and rebirth in Capricorn. We'll get to that. And so Pluto's known to highlight the power of a sign, the positive aspects, as well as the toxicity aspects. So we're going to get into a little bit of both Capricorn and Aquarius as to what that could be about. And if we look at what the symbol is represented, this is a little bit more of an artistic representation of the symbol of Pluto, but there's a cross on the bottom. Crosses typically represent some sort of rebirth experience, if I think about the association with the Christian cross of the resurrection. And then there's a crescent curve upward to catch something, which is a full circle. A full circle is a symbol of the goddess. It's a symbol of creation. So Pluto's, even the glyph for it is speaking to this process of us going through these rites of passage so that we can be reborn. So another thing about Pluto is its sphere of influence is huge. It's got a 246 to 248 year orbit. And there's a classification of the personal planets and the transpersonal planets. So the personal planets are Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars. Those are on the inside of the asteroid belt. Those are the things that many astrologers talk about, where a lot of us are more familiar with the Mercury retrograde, how it affects our technology. It's almost a very mundane 3D thing, but it also affects traffic and affects our physical world. The transpersonal planets are those on the far side of the asteroid belt: Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. They also include the trans-Neptunian objects, the Kuiper belt objects, the Plutinos, and the further out we get, the more subtle the energy gets. So transpersonal is indicating that it's beyond us. It's about a larger scale, generational level, societal level, global level. And so Pluto, as well, it's no longer a planet, but it's known as the farthest planet. It's got the most far-reaching, long-term, large-scale influence. And finally, just to consider before we go to the next slide, Pluto's placement is actually, I didn't know this until a couple of years ago, that Pluto is used to define the generations of humanity. Its placement is kind of, how there's the groupings of the 80s and the 70s. So the Gen Xers are myself included, born in 1971 and 1983. Millennials are where, so that's when Pluto's in Libra. Millennials are when Pluto's in Scorpio. So where Pluto is does inform these larger scales of what's happening with humanity. So let's keep going with this. Just we're starting with an overview of Pluto. We're going to get into Pluto past, present, and future, but I kind of want us to unpack a little bit. It's beyond this scary demolition planet, and it's not just simply death and rebirth, but power, depth, transformation are keywords. Depending on how you're listening to these energies, we'll get to that in a second. It could also be crisis. It could be the need to surrender, the big nature, death and rebirth. Pluto is also seen as the higher octave of Mars. So this is interesting because if Mars is Aries, I am the will of the individual, then Pluto would be the will of the collective. And so, I've offered that Pluto is subtle energy. It's the power of nature. But so if we think about what our personal will, which is Mars, is aligned. Hold on, let me make sure that I can hear myself. When our personal will is aligned with the collective, when Mars is aligned with Pluto, everything's fine. But when that's not the case, when our personal will is not aligned with where the collective is headed, then what happens is Pluto just simply, that's when demolition comes in. Pluto simply overtakes. The energy simply is there. And that's, if we think back to January 2020 and all of our experience of COVID, there was this kind of wave that came over humanity. And the wave was something very Pluto and Capricorn-esque. So Pluto's interesting, though, because part of the energy is not to put up a stronger fight, to know when to surrender, but not to have it be a just to surrender. Pluto doesn't necessarily like wimps, but Pluto also, it's not just go with the flow, happy-go-lucky. Pluto wants us to get stronger. Pluto wants us to get grounded. Pluto wants us to see our position along with the bigger picture of the collective and to recognize when we're in alignment and when we can shift. And so this is great because I'm preparing. Well, actually, I just downloaded the podcast for the new moon yesterday, and it's so perfect because that is what we're really being ushered into, is this embodiment of the collective and the understanding of our role in the collective. And so another way to think of Pluto is its job is to keep the engine of the universe going, quote unquote. So it does that in kind of a Kali-esque way. If you remember the Hindu goddess Kali, who thrives on humanity's yuckiness. Well, Pluto, if it doesn't sustain life, if something is rotten, if there's a tree branch that's rotten, Pluto's going to eliminate it. It needs space for healthy growth. So at a personal level, Pluto helps us eliminate what's not working in our lives. But that's scary, but also that helps us create space for what we do want. It helps us build resilience. It helps us build true personal power. And so what's coming for us is the understanding of our personal power based on the power of the collective. Ubuntu, which is what that's the upcoming course that I'm teaching. But that's kind of the themes of what Pluto's about. So let's get to you don't have to, I'm going to put this up. Don't worry if you can't read it all right now. We're gonna parse apart some of these transits and aspects. But if you look at the top, I'm going in linear time. We're starting with March 7th, 2023, when Saturn entered Pisces. Shortly thereafter, Pluto went into Aquarius. That's this year. That present is going to be 2023. The bottom of that chart goes all the way through 2025, 2026, and Pluto's in Aquarius until 2024. So we're going to be looking at how it's entering Aquarius, when it's going back into Capricorn, and there's some really cool semi-squares that Saturn and Pluto are dancing together. So let's dig a little bit into the past. So in 2008, Pluto entered the sign of Capricorn. So a lot of astrologers, I'm not really that versed in that or that interested, but I do know that there's been bank failures. So bank failures is kind of one of the structures. What Pluto's doing is excavating our structures, excavating the things that we've built that everyone's beholding to. And if it doesn't work, Pluto's tearing it apart. So Capricorn is the last earth sign of the zodiac. It's associated with business, economy, corporate power, traditional infrastructure. So we're breaking through and getting the clarity of what's going on. We're in a particularly intense time right now because Pluto's coming back and forth in and out of the final degrees of Capricorn. If you've heard me talk about it in the podcast, those are the anaretic degrees. Those are the degrees where there's the most intensity, there's the most chance to really see the shadow side. And so Pluto's hanging out there for quite some time doing its excavations. So I tend to see it coming as a little bit of a fireworks show. But if you think about it, if you're watching a fireworks show, whoa, that's a big deal. Whoa, that's really exciting. There's going to be a lot of stuff, but then you're also just watching the fireworks show. So it's nothing to be feared. You can look at this whole fireworks show as if you're watching it in an amphitheater or on a screen. But it's about the revelations of how power, which should be used for the collective, has been sequestered. So I mentioned that Pluto does this thing where it shows the power and the toxicity of a sign. So if we look at where we've been from 2008, the positive side of Capricorn, every sign has its shadow and its light sides. Capricorn is the sea goat, the sure-footed, slow-moving, hard-working, steady creation of foundation. It can create a solid foundation. It can create solid structures. We still live in this physical world. We need those things. The negative side is when it's outdated and it doesn't work and it doesn't suit. That's what we're witnessing right now. Aquarius, we're all excited that we're headed into the age of Aquarius, and Pluto's in Aquarius to help us prepare freedom, equality, oneness, unity consciousness. You've also probably heard some people are talking a lot about the technology that Aquarius is going to bring in. I would offer that some of that technology is fragile and some of it has the ability to be a little bit toxic, in the sense that we need to remember to rely on ourselves. We can have some things automated. Thank goodness for Zoom. We wouldn't even be here. So I'm not saying technology is evil. I'm saying it's going to be a really important place for us to recognize our position of power within these technologies so that we can continue to have our freedoms and create a society, an Aquarian society of equality. So then the latter part of this slide is back to January 2020, where Saturn and the great Saturn and Pluto conjunction, which kicked off the COVID, brought many things to an end. A lot of times when we think about the Mars versus Pluto, it wasn't often by our own choice that we had to do things. That's the nature of the wave of Pluto. But sometimes its force is bigger than us. And for our 3D world, it was the force of illness, the forces of government, the forces of the weather, the forces of the power that be. There was a lot of grief and melancholy in not being able to just keep going on the conveyor belt. There was a lot of sense of loss. There was a lot of sense of the old ways and wanting to get back to the old ways. But that grief and that loss, if we can look at it in this Plutonian way, just like anything, the universe abhors a vacuum. So all the personal work that we've done can call in something that is even better for ourselves and for the collective. So let's jump to Pluto today and in the past. This is really cool. So this is Pluto present, meaning 2023. So Pluto just slipped into Aquarius and came back out for a little bit. It's in Capricorn right now. But the last time Pluto was in Aquarius was between 1777 and 1798. I'm a 1976 baby, so I happen to have it in my mind that that's when the United States became the United States. And if you think about what that was about, there were old powers, the monarchies, the ruling structures of Europe. The colonizers didn't want to have this large hand come over them, so they fought for their independence. They fought for their ability to be free of all that. And they created the American Constitution, which was written when Pluto was in Aquarius. The Constitution's first words are "we the people." So that's pointing to their ability to recognize that Aquarius was out there. So we the people was kind of saying it wasn't just a leader, it was a self-governing entity, and it regulated itself. So again, during this time, it's interesting that we're in this election time, and we'll get to some of the aspects of the United States and how this is our Pluto. People will talk about this as our Pluto return. That humans don't get to experience their Pluto return in the same body, because you can see you have to be alive for 200 to 300 years to get that. But the Pluto return is kind of like a Saturn return. It's a time when the energies are coming back. So it's a time for all of us beyond the United States to think of what have we shed in the structures, and what was it that they wanted to create, and is that still authentic? And to remember that the plural entity takes priority over the individual. So I mentioned in that big chart of dates, we're still talking about 2023. The first date on that chart was that Saturn entering Pisces. This is significant because of the squares that are happening. So the first 3 dates you've already seen, and then we've already experienced all this. Pluto's in Capricorn from June 11th, 2023 until January 2024. Saturn is spending some time in Pisces. The next thing I shared is right below that. Saturn's actually in Pisces in 2 little windows. So the 7th of this year to the 24th of May of 2025, and then briefly again 2025 to 2026. Don't worry about those dates as much as to kind of get a sense of how Saturn's encapsulating this time in Pisces. So this is a Saturn transit. Saturn transits in general offer us teaching points to take responsibility for ourselves. Saturn, known as the planet of karma, briefly, wants us to simplify. It wants us to define what we are. It wants us to really ground things down. Saturn helps us to look at things realistically, to see the truth of things, to reveal the weak areas that need strengthening so that the structure can exist on a good foundation. And Saturn takes its time, which is a very good thing. So with Saturn in Pisces, the watery sign of Pisces, we're right now through Pluto entering into Aquarius, assessing the systems, and these are very simpatico themes, which is why I think it's cool that these aspects are, if we think about when themes in astrology stack up, and it becomes this not just one thing that's happening, but oh my gosh, look, there's 7 or 8 different bubbles of energy that are all vibrating like this. You can really start to feel it and get a sense of what's happening. So we're assessing whether our systems are working regarding how we manage our time and our energy, how we approach spirituality, how we exercise compassion. We also come to recognize that as we're more responsible for ourselves, it's our right and our responsibility to impact and to improve the collective. And that's just Saturn and Pisces, but I hope you can start to see how that very lovely, in a lovely manner, overlays Pluto and Aquarius. Because Aquarius, on its positive side, is the collective, is unity consciousness, is oneness, is the freedom of and the value of every individual. Which brings me to the next slide. I already said some of this. One of the ways you can think about it is the non-blood family, the brothers and sisters of humanity. And, there's something really special happening in the collective right now. I think, we're all gathered here, coming together in circle. I think we're able to see that we're the humanity of everyone. And this idea of friendship, but friendship not in this old way of seeing the humanity and being able to connect to the humanity of others and allowing that experience to be expansive. So, and coming together, we'll realize that we are doing this not alone. So there's a Sufi teacher that said the days of the guru were over and the future would be about spiritual friendship, which is where some of the quotes from above come. And I think about that when when I do a Reiki training, Reiki is the modern word for energy healing. We talk about how all a healing is, all Jesus did when he laid on hands in the Bible was hold the highest vision of the person being healed, merge his field with theirs, and allow them the opportunity to vibe up, to resonate with the light that he was holding. That's what a healer does. That's the same thing that gurus do. So if we think about, the time of guru culture where people would go to an ashram and just lay around with a guru to be enlightened, that was a necessary thing in our past. I would offer that now is a really good time for us to take ownership of that and be that light on our own, because that is what's needed. That's what's being called within the collective. It's no longer a top down, it's a everybody lighting up. So Aquarius is an air sign. Air signs are about communication and intellect. There are 3 air signs in the zodiac. Gemini is about our sign of the twins. It's about our internal communication. Libra, sign of the scales, is about interpersonal communication, one-to-one communication. Aquarius, being the sign of the collective, is going to be about the one-to-many and the many-to-many communications, which again is signaling this lighting up of the collective. And I would remind or offer that communication is not just verbal. It's everything's energy. We are every moment of every day offering energetic communication. So this is perfect because this is what Pluto's about. This is what Pluto is helping us to understand in Aquarius. And that's also Pluto being ruled by Uranus. Uranus is, I like to say, reminding us that we are the high technology we seek. Again, to kind of recognize that we have all the powers that we need, and we can work with this 3D technology so that we can remember how to empower everyone. All right, so we're clipping along at a nice pace. Let's touch on 2024, which isn't too far away. So Pluto's going to enter back into Aquarius in January, as I mentioned, and there's these semi-squares that we'll talk about, 2 of which happen when Pluto is in Aquarius, 1 of which happens when Pluto is in Capricorn. So this is the final dance of the anaretic degrees of Pluto in Cap. And so I mentioned that Uranus in this previous slide, this is very well suited to Pluto's energetic as well as Uranus. So Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius. Saturn is the traditional ruler of Aquarius. This is why these semi-squares with Pluto are, again, the alignment, the convergence of the energy, where the themes seem to kind of be very, even if they are intense and they're not of this moment, when they're coming online in such a nice way, we can see that we're going to be surrounded by these energies. So there's 3 semi-squares here. And if we think about Saturn as being the traditional ruler in astrology, Saturn gives an understanding of the constraints of time, the constraints of the physical world, so that we can shape the 3D world. Saturn karma reminds us of our limits and our duties and our obligations. Saturn with Aquarius gives Aquarius an interest in policy making, foundations for the future. That's what 2024 is going to be about. But if Capricorn, the other Saturn ruled sign that Pluto just came out of, represents executive power, the president, the prime minister, the CEO, the guru. Aquarius represents the Congress, the supervisory boards, the unions, the collective, represents a large group of people to exercise power. And so Aquarius is also thought of by us in the modern day to be ruled by futuristic Uranus. This gives Aquarius a drive to continually challenge status quo, to make changes, to innovate, to be the technology that we seek. So the 3 squares between Saturn and Pluto, squares are typically seen as conflict in traditional astrology. I offer their challenges that come up so that we can rise above, so that we can be free. And these squares are possibly going to be very harmonious and powerful. And maybe harmonious isn't the right word. Aligned is the word everything's converging. So the energies are going to be flowing together to support us in lifting up and out of the old and shifting into the new. So Pluto's going to be in Aquarius for 2 of these 3, for the first and the final. And because Saturn is the ancient ruler of Aquarius, it's a time for all this information from past civilizations to be able to come through for us now. It's also interesting to note that if we think about the US, I'm not really into the political scene. I am, and I'm aware. But if we think about the presidential elections that are coming up for the United States of America, Saturn's going to be, Pluto's going to be in Capricorn until November 19th. Our elections happen just before that. But if we think about the analogy, and that could be scary, but let's think back to 1776. That was a time of extreme uncertainty. It was a time of massive revolution, but everything was okay. Pluto's already informing us. Pluto in Cap is doing a final excavation. We already have a downloaded understanding of Pluto in Aquarius, and all that's going to be truly coming online just days after that election. I don't have any predictions about that election, but I actually find a lot of comfort in these dates, because it shows us that also there's going to be a fireworks show. Sit back and watch. But Pluto in Aquarius is really going to help us, I think, take it to another higher octave of not just singular rule down, of collective rule, collective, not rule, but collective cooperation. Okay, I'm about to shift gears. Well, no, let me actually relate this one more time back to Saturn in Pisces. So if we go back up here, these energies are still going to be very active during this time, because Saturn's in Pisces through the middle of 2025. We're assessing whether our systems are working, about time and energy, spirituality, compassion. We're also being asked to be taking more responsibility for ourselves and how we impact and improve. So the power is within us, and the things that are going to be happening in 2024 are going to be for the good of the collective in the future. I sense that that is inevitable. So we're going to shift gears next, and we're going to talk about the Plutinos. The Plutinos are trans-Neptunian objects, which include asteroids and dwarf planets. This picture that we're looking at is actually the distribution of, the Plutinos are on the outside of this. So down here, we see Pluto. Oops, what did I do? Pluto's down in the bottom right-hand corner, and you can see Jupiter and Saturn are in the middle. But all these white bodies out here, this is kind of the Kuiper Belt objects, so to speak. So a lot of them are asteroids and dwarf planets. They're in the inner part of the Kuiper Belt with an orbit that's linked to both Pluto and Neptune. So to be a Plutino, that name refers only to its orbital characteristic. For every 2 orbits a Plutino makes, Neptune orbits 3 times. They have an orbit similar to Pluto. They are about a quarter of the Kuiper Belt objects. So the Plutinos are becoming relevant, much like the Kuiper Belt objects. Some astrologers will say this, others won't. I've always had an interest in Kuiper Belt objects and Plutinos because subtle energy. These are the asteroids and the planets are the furthest out, so they have a compelling force on our 3D world. The words that come up for Plutinos are very Pluto-esque. They often take 1 or 2 of the characteristics of Pluto, a Plutino will, and I'll just highlight that. So the words would be radical, transforming, confronting, penetrating darkness, penetrating patterns of daily life. They have a scorpionic kind of soul mining aspect to them. They also have this sort of death, transforming, cutting away, letting go type of energy. So among the Plutinos that are the most relevant, and we'll just kind of, this is kind of a door swinging open into some of the things that I'll be presenting at the end of the year and into 2024, because a lot of these, I'll talk about some of the asteroids and some of the dwarf planets sometimes, but I think they're really coming online. So it's worth noting Eris was discovered in 2006. So Eris is the one in the Greek myth where all the gods on Olympus were having a wedding party. She didn't get invited. She took the golden apple, threw it into the beautiful party and said to the Pharis, and then all the goddesses, Athena and Aphrodite, had this egoic brawl. So she was showing them their ego. But Eris is known to use chaos and disruption to reorganize. So that it's a very Plutonic theme to so that we can recognize the power of our life force. Interesting to remember that when Eris was discovered in 2006, she's actually known to be the female partner to male Pluto by many people. She's the same size, more or less, but she has more mass. She's actually then therefore bigger than Pluto. So when Eris was discovered, Pluto was demoted. It was very dramatic in the 3D world, from a planet to a dwarf planet. So Pluto now even is considered as the peer to Eris. So Pluto is among this body of Plutinos. A couple more that I think are coming online. Orcus. Orcus is an Etruscan god of the underworld, a very kind of scary person, but Orcus was the punisher of broken oaths. Punisher might be a harsh word, probably the karmic rebalancer of oaths and whether or not those oaths are energetically followed through. Huya, discovered in 2000. It's an underworld deity of Egypt. Very much about kind of in a Virgoic fashion, attentive attention to detail, focused and dedicated, and very much about religious and spiritual ritual. And then Ixion will also be coming through for us in a little bit. He's the father of the centaurs. He's also a very feared creature, but centaurs are kind of like dragons, really only feared because they're not understood. He understands the karmic wheel. He offers a reset and a second chance. So this is the underworld theme here is Pluto is the god of the underworld in Greek and Roman myth, right? So all of these bodies, many of them that are Plutinos, they're all associated with the energetic of Pluto, and the Kuiper Belt objects, of which some of them are the trans-Neptunian objects, all have this kind of ethereal, subtle energetic about them that are going to be supporting us in tuning into the subtle energies and realizing the power of those subtle energies. And I offer in learning to trust those. Just as I to go back up here to these dates about 2024, that's going to be a very interesting and challenging year for humanity, something tells me. But also, if we can learn to trust the energetic of the death and rebirth process, and to know that the best thing we can do is take ownership for our vibration and what we send out, then we can sit back and watch the show and be in the show, be in the world, but not of it. So that's the kind of the nature of this energy that's really coming through stronger and stronger at the end of this year and into next year. So that's going to close my presentation. I'm going to give one more shout out because the subtle energies are at play. I'm offering this course that's starting on September 29th, and it's really all about connecting to the other world, because we're at the end of the year, because the veil is thin, because we're in eclipse season, because the nature of the energetics that are coming through, we're going to be able to connect to our ancestors as the doorway to everything, to the natural world, to the world of the animal kingdom, to the world of higher consciousness. So I hope that this was helpful. I've been talking for about over 30 minutes. So I'm going to stop that for a second and see if anybody has anything they would like to compliment or share or that resonates.
Yes, I would like to thank you for this, because this was really great. And I think that I am not scared of Pluto anymore, which I need to admit I was scared before. And now you managed to release this fear. Now I look a little bit more optimistic into this time, and especially this idea that you offered about the Pluto's energy, which is just not just scary demolisher, but the energy which is actually working for our benefit. as really very nice. So thank you very much. This was really nice, really good.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, Heidi says to your comment, same. And I felt when I that little drawing of the man with the muscles being like, I am Mars, huh, like that is so where we're coming out of, but we're all so conditioned to that, right? And of course, it's mostly the women that kind of tend to sense it and feel it first, but of course we're leading out of that. So all that graphic is reminding us is that we are part of everything, and our only job is to release enough and hold, to let go and trust the energy, trust the flow of energy. It's like if you really, if I really want a job and I'm banging on that wall, if I want a job, then maybe I should release that and let the energy go over there to that job, right? So it's allowing the flow of the energy to happen and realizing that it's all happening for the right reason. And I love, I love the metaphor of the American Revolution, because it's like a big deal, it's also not a big deal, but it was a big deal back then, right? And we can kind of see how that was a stand up to colonial power, and whether or not it was successful is arguable, right? But also the ideas that were behind there were very noble, we the people, right? And so then it's like, oh, this is and when those cycles happen, especially because we think about the Yuga cycle, the light's getting more and more and more, so there's a way to refine that energetic and make it even more truthful, even more integrity around the collective. And I believe that's what we're going to be seeing. And I think the only time it feels scary and unfair is when we're too invested. It's like if we've spent our whole lives building up walls and hoarding gold, and we don't want to share it with anybody, and we don't give a flip, it's probably going to be a hard season for us right now. And it doesn't mean you have to go be a pilgrim and have no possessions and live in the middle of the woods, kind of like I do. But it means you have to be willing to go with the flow. Yeah. So thank you, Kasia, for your comment. Let's see, another comment. This was excellent. Have had some destructive phases in March, was needed, but was not exactly as it went. Pluto tears down to make better. You affirmed that. Yeah. The way, I mean, the Pluto's, if you read about it in astrology, it loves demolition, and we all go, oh, crap. No, it only loves the stuff that doesn't work. It's tearing apart the stuff that doesn't work so that we can be refined, we can be uplifted. So this is great. I love it that everybody showed up, and thank you guys. Anybody have anything else they want to share?
I would agree. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say I really like the metaphor of fireworks. That they are explosions, but you're far enough away that you can enjoy the show, kind of, or you're going to be okay.
Yeah, it was funny. I was sitting there yesterday and I was like, why have fireworks? And I was like, oh, highly entertaining, volatile, slightly uncontrollable, but also if you're sitting in the amphitheater watching it, you get to decide if you want to go grab a hot dog or if you want to just watch it or whatever you want to do with it. But there's that buffer, right? That we don't, and that's also the subtle energy is the clue, the answer is there, is take control of your power, take control of your vibration. If it doesn't feel good, stop watching or something like that, stop vibrating, and then reset for the next day or something like that, so that the answer's already in all the verbiage of what we're talking about. So it's nothing to, and then we remember that it's like, oh, a higher version of my self-sovereignty, all this personal work that we've been doing however many years in the making, right? So we're being invited to lift that up a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be hard. I think we're going to say, oh, I know this, I can do this, I have this skill. And I think that's where it's going to feel even more empowering, because all of this is supposed to be exciting. However, many people are afraid of it. Thank you.
Yeah, I like that. And with the fireworks, you can get close if you want, or back far away.
Yeah, you can hold the sparkler in your hand. You can get a big firework right in front of you. You can do whatever you want with it. Yeah, that's a really thank you for extending that metaphor. That's fantastic.
So I've actually had Saturn and Pluto dancing in my chart all year. And what resonated with me, Lisa Marie, was when you're saying fighting it, right? In the beginning, I was fighting it. And then it was kind of dawned on to me to just let go, just to let it go and to just see what it's going to destroy, because I know it's going to be rebuilt, but just to let go and see what happens.
Yeah, and that is to trust the friction, and to let the friction just be a signal, because the friction is almost like, this is hard. It's like, okay, wait, friction. Something's up here. That's the subtle energy, right? How quickly can you tune into that so that you can release and watch instead of be in that dance, so that you can know when to move. And that's the energy that humanity is mostly desensitized to, which is why a lot of this process has been brutal for a lot of people, which is why we need to have compassion. And none of us are better, but all of us, I think the more we choose to do the work for everybody, it's like energy healing. There's just karma. We're not doing it for the karma, but there's good karma all over the place for taking ownership of who you are. And that's the neat thing of whenever you're doing light work, like, you get all those benefits, and you're not doing it so that you can amass the benefits. And that's the part, like, we're not sitting there hoarding up gold. We're doing it for the collective. That's what's needed. That's what will be honored. So I love that you brought up the friction part, because I think that's also relevant, and we're all in it, and we're all activated by it in our charts. I tend to shy away from telling you to go look at your chart, but the truth is, go look at your chart. See where this stuff lies. I have Pluto, oh my gosh, in my 12th house in Libra or Scorpio, and an anoretic, like, it's super intense. So of course I'm sitting here so excited talking about it, because I'm like, it's my birthday, guys. It's exciting, but also it's really scary. It's a really scary time for people who are still on the conveyor belt, as sometimes I call it. And it's an invitation to hop off for a second. And if there was a blessing for COVID, that was it. We couldn't autopilot anymore. All the ways that I personally love to go to Trader Joe's and not be self-sufficient and not make myself food. I mean, I needed a shift. So there it was. Thank you, guys. Okay, well, we're already at 45 minutes. This is perfect. Thank you. Wonderful talk. Yeah, so this will be a recording. I appreciate everybody that came on. One last just moment for anybody else who wants to share.
Just more of the same. I think that I've been feeling I don't know, anxiety or something's off, and I think that it's continually pushing me to go a little deeper and recognizing that and taking ownership, all of those themes, taking ownership for what doesn't sit well with me, still sorting out my own energy. And yeah, I think that taking responsibility for what I bring and how I interpret things has been a really strong theme for me a lot lately. So
And that's the beauty. That's what I love about astrology, is it gets us beyond our ego into this, like, this isn't personal. It's very personal, but also it's not as personal as we think it is. We're not being punished. There's nothing wrong with us. And if anything, it's like, oh, I'm on the right track. Oh, of course this is happening. Oh, I'm affected by the energy. Oh, it's not just all me and my ego and my mind just figure out and sort through everything. We are surrounded by a collective of consciousnesses everywhere, right? So then it's like, it just helps me personally kind of take a deep breath. And I almost, instead of I'm like leaning forward and trying, I find my energy sits back. I find that it's almost like I fall back a little bit into this sense of like, oh, it's all okay. And that what came through is Saturn moves slow, even though Saturn's a personal planet, and the other ones move even slower. If we think about the amount of time that Pluto's just hanging out, taking things apart, it's going to be about 4 or 5 years. It's going to be at least until 2024 and then the fallout from that, because the 3D world will still have a lot of people that are still holding on to those things. But I think there'll be enough of a shift by that time that it will be, for those who have eyes to see, very apparent. Katie says, thank you. You're welcome. Thank you, Dorothy, for your comment. All right. I love you guys. Anybody else have anything they want to share? Thank you all for being here in Circle. This is a really special day. I feel so grateful for our community, and I feel so grateful to just be, and this is a blessing of technology. Technology isn't evil. It's just a matter of, like I said, remembering your power within it and your place in it and using it for the things that you want to. Raya says tons of love, white hearts. You bet, sister. Raya. All right, guys. Well, with that,
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
you're welcome. The dogs are barking, so I think it's time. All right, guys, be blessed. I'll talk to you soon. Have a good day. Have a good weekend.